This episode of the 7th Valkyrie podcast was brought to you by me, Valentine Descartes, Iron Wolf of Edera. To get the full experience, including all available seasons, extra artwork, bonus features, and behind-the-scenes content, you can download the 7th Valkyrie app at the link in the description. Hello, everyone, and welcome to an episode of the 7th Valkyrie podcast. My name is Colin Sharp, and I'll be your host today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the 7th Valkyrie podcast.
Yeah, but whatever. You
brought
get
to you by
slightly
me,
different
Valentine Descartes.
I don't write it down, and
To get the full
it's just
experience,
like, hey,
including
what's
all
going on?
available
Anyway,
seasons,
so
extra artwork,
apart from that
bonus
tone,
features, and
today we're actually talking about
behind-the-scenes
something that is
content.
very,
Download the 7th
I wouldn't call it
Valkyrie app
serious,
at the link
but
in
it
the
has a lot of
description.
weight in my life, which is
Go
something
on.
that
It's
is called
waiting
the
for
Timanous
you.
prayer. Now, a lot of people have scripture passages, prayers, yada, 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 mantras that are fundamental to them. And this is definitely one for me. It's certainly foundational in my life, and I think that there's a sort of way of the world and a perspective on life that is really elegantly and eloquently summed up in this prayer. And the first thing is that it's not really even a prayer in the traditional sense of it's not really like, or at least as we know it in the U.S., where lots of prayers are like to a specific religious deity, or this really isn't about that. It's sort of a way of life, and that really comes from an idea that kind of permeates all of Timanous. So for a brief summary, this is a 100-year-old camp that was founded when the founder, Luther Halsey Gulick, thought that the world was getting too busy and that people were losing touch with the great outdoors, with themselves, just with the distractions of daily life. This was in 1919 when he was saying this. So you can see that there's a lot more distractions now and a lot more to fill our brains. And so, I found it to be, it's a 7-week summer camp up in Rustic, Maine, no electricity, but no electronics, no phones, no distractions, just, the joy of the outdoors and fellowship with your fellow person. So there's also an element of, when Luther Gulick was creating this whole camp and camping system, this was the guy who founded the YMCA. He drew a lot from Native American culture, some of which has kind of faded over time because it was a little bit more kind of cultural appropriating than it was paying homage. But there's a lot of traditions left that still look to Native American ancestral wisdom and cultural wisdom as guiding principles to kind of, because this is very related to a lot of, I think it was Sioux Indian traditions. But when it comes down to it, is this a piece of writing that captures a way of life and a perspective, and I wanted to share it with you guys. I was going to originally read it, but I pretty much know it from heart, and I am going to read the newer version, which I'll explain later. But it goes, "Together we give thanks for the joy of fellowship, for the beauty of our surroundings, for the tall trees and sparkling waves and the life which teems around us in the woods, for skies and clear waters. We give thanks for the love of doing things, for active bodies and minds alert, for the excitement of something new and the comfort of things which are old. For all these we give thanks, for the cool and quiet of evening, for the restfulness of night, the glory of starry skies and the new life which comes in showers, for our elders and our families who have given us our homes, and for the trials which help us to know ourselves. For all these we give thanks." And I can, even as I say it, I can hear it being said by, because we, at the end of every council fire, which was a weekly tradition, we would all link arms, youngest camper to oldest camper to oldest counselor who'd been there for 50 years. And we would, just recite this prayer we were all always out in the woods, and it was, I can feel in my chest, the reverberation of other people saying it. And so, first of all, I think that the elements found with here are just amazing. Together we give thanks. We're just gratitude. the joy of fellowship, like the beauty of our surroundings and the natural world. And then as you go on, it's like, for the love of doing things, for active bodies and minds alert. This isn't a lazy prayer. Instead, it is about being active and engaged with nature and the world around us. For the excitement of things that are new, but also the comfort of things which are old, which I think is such a great balance of like appreciating the new traditions, but also like enjoying things that are new. And then you get to the final two parts, because it's a little bit more about the beauty and the quiet moments. And, there's a lot of reverence for nature, which is, to me, really important. And then you get to, for our elders and our families who have given us our homes, and for the trials which help us to know ourselves. Elders and families, to me, is something that I'll get back to as I'm talking about how this prayer has evolved. But the trials that help us to know ourselves, to me, is such a powerful, universal, and like amazing concept that I think people, we live in a world that grows increasingly fun, fast, and easy, and you can just find any entertainment, anything, just blah, 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 like wherever you want it. Everything's quick, everything's fast, and I think one of the things that really resonates with me is that while the convenience and the abilities of the modern world that have opened us up to have so many more possibilities, there are ways that it kind of hampers us, and it makes us, it leaves certain parts of our brains undeveloped, or, we don't have a time to refine as many skills. Or maybe we have time to refine more, but like I guess what I mean to say is that the trials which help us to know ourselves, it's very easy. There's a lot of increasing number of people in the world who just live within their comfort zone and don't ever dare to step beyond. I think that's a part of the reason is why so many people are afraid and why there's so much hate out there, is because the world is scary, and people are like, oh, I just want to stay in my comfort zone. But the Timanous prayer gives thanks for the trials that help us to know ourselves, the hard times, and how they help us know who we are. And to me, that's something powerful. And it's not like we're not asking to be, given the answers. We're just saying we appreciate that the hard times teach us to know ourselves better. And the last part I actually wanted to emphasize on this was how the prayer has evolved over time. So when I first went to Camp Timanous, there were two major changes. One was we started with, rather than together we give thanks, it was we thank thee, O Lord, which was, at the time when it was created was very, sort of a general population of, it was just sort of like the Great Spirit kind of vibe. Like it's not a specific sect of any particular religion. It was very universal. But together we give thanks kind of removes any misunderstanding. What we really are doing is we're giving thanks, and you can choose who you want to give thanks to, whether it's a male lord, whether it's a queen, whether it's the earth. Who you choose to thank is up to you, but together we give thanks, and I think gratitude is foundational there. There was another point where they talk about, rather than, it's we give thanks as opposed to we thank thee, because again, it's taking it to become more of a personal prayer. And then at the end, one of the last lines, rather than being, when I first started, was for our mothers and fathers who have given us our homes, as opposed to our elders and families. And there's not, like a huge problem with the one before, but it does exclude a little bit people who might have, two male parents or two female parents, or they might have been raised by a grandfather, or, they might have been raised with no parents. The people might not care for our families, and that's why, or there may be any number of complicated situations. And to me, that's why it was really cool to see that it had evolved to be, for our elders, which can be anybody. It can be your mother and your father, but it can also be a trusted advisor. It could be a grandparent. It could be an uncle, a godparent, anybody who helped lead you to the place you are today, a teacher, a coach. And for our families, and families is more than just, your blood. It's for the people who you call family, whether they're blood related or not. And I think that those were two really great examples of how you could modernize an old piece of language without losing the meaning, and instead unlock it further. Lots of poems and fight songs and all this stuff is like, it's weird. It gets so caught up in, for example, my little brother and a lot of my extended family went to Ole Miss, and there's a lot of problems, like Colonel Reb, who's a rebel in the Civil War, fighting to protect slavery, and so it's like the idea to them was just like, oh, we're rebels, like we're defiant, but in the modern era, that's kind of uncomfortable, and a lot of how universities and institutions will deal with these old traditions is they'll kind of just like, for lack of, I hate using this word, but they'll kind of like wokeify it, where they're just like, rather than saying, putting in the extra effort to really unlock the true meaning and decipher it, it's like, for our mothers and fathers and mothers and fathers and non-binary parents and non-parental authority figures, it's like it just feels a little bit like sometimes in the attempt to update the meaning to the modern era, they sort of lose a little bit of the magic that made the piece so valuable in the first place, and it can kind of stick out. But that's why it's so interesting to me that this prayer and the writers who updated it were like able to say, we want this prayer to evolve and be stronger, not to be like have some modern asterisk tacked on to old art. We want this to to evolve to the modern era, because regardless of what the language was, that the sentiment is about gratitude, strength, and fellowship with our fellow person and with the people who came before us. So, anyway, I just think that's really beautiful. And whenever you are facing challenges in your daily life, I try and bring it up every once in a while. But I hope that maybe this comes back to you. And maybe one day, together we can all give thanks for the joy of fellowship. But yeah, so that's the prayer. Look it up. Timanous is the name of Timanous. But yeah, it's a really beautiful concept, and it was something I wanted to share with you guys. So with that, that's done with this episode of the 7th Valkyrie podcast, and I will talk to you guys later.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the 7th Valkyrie podcast, brought to you by me, Valentin Descartes. To get the full experience, including all available seasons, extra artwork, bonus features, and behind-the-scenes content, download the 7th Valkyrie app at the link in the description. Go on, it's waiting for you.